Find the features that are most relevant to your business and hone in on what is going to make the most impact. Obviously, there's a ton of new features with every single Salesforce release. This one is no exception. There's a lot to sort through. It can be hard to focus on what matters most. So understand what you use today, review the updates that are most impactful for your business, because this will be different from business to business, cloud to cloud, depending on what you do and which products you use, and search through those resources, listen through what we talked about today, just find a few things that really hit home, and then focus in on those to bring the most value to your business.
This podcast is brought to you by Fast Slow Motion, a team of expert consultants that have helped thousands of growing businesses build scalable systems on the Salesforce and HubSpot platforms. To learn more, visit fastslowmotion.com.
Welcome to the Fast Slow Motion podcast, where we teach you how to build a business you love while enjoying your life. I'm your host, Sam Donaghey, and today I'm joined by Fast Slow Motion's Director of AI, Zack Terry. Salesforce has just rolled out the Winter 26 release. Zack, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this might be the most AI-heavy release that we've ever seen.
I think it would be a stretch if we didn't see AI updates these days. I think it's very much expected. And so, yes, of course, we have quite a bit of AI updates, but a lot of great platform updates to talk about as well.
Well, Zack, look, this is how we're going to tackle it today. First, we're going to hit the lightning round highlights. So if you don't have time for the full episode, you'll still get the most important takeaways. And then we're going to deep dive into the big three: Agentforce, Salesforce Flow, and the cloud updates. And if you want the full breakdown in writing, check out our Salesforce Winter 26 release blog. The link is going to be in the description. All right, Zack, before we get into the details, give us the quick hits. What should everyone have on their radar from Winter 26?
All right, Sam, so here's the lightning round highlights. So first, we're going to talk about admin and user experience. An exciting update for admins. We're getting type ahead in list views, so you can find records faster with a better search experience. We're finally getting multi-column sorting, so you have a much more flexible list view experience. You can now sort with multiple columns. You are getting dashboard reference lines, which is a great way to spot trends and targets really quickly. You can set a value to benchmark that performance visually, and you're going to get a refreshed setup homepage. So it's a simpler navigation for admins. It's really designed to make the initial learning curve for new admins out there quite a bit easier, including recommending suggested tasks. Now, moving on to the developer and the productivity and system health side of things, DevOps Center is now generally available. So this has been available in beta for quite a long time. Now it's finally coming to the mainstream. It's going to streamline deployments. It will reduce the number of headaches that you might have with change sets. And of course, it comes with its own learning curve, but it's finally here. My domain is finally being completely enforced. So this was enforced a couple years ago, and they put redirects in place. Those redirects have been working for the past 2 years. Now they are going away. So it's going to be very important to monitor your URLs in the system. Anything that's not on your My Domain is no longer going to be redirected. So make sure that you have addressed that. Trusted mode for Lightning Web Components is coming. And I have to be honest, I'm not a developer, so I had to get the lowdown from our director of development. And the highlight here is it's more flexibility for custom apps. Our director of development said this is a significant update for LWC because it removes the traditional security sandbox that has historically blocked many popular web libraries from working properly inside of Salesforce environments. And so many of the web's more popular libraries use certain browser APIs that don't work well with Locker or with Lightning. And this trusted mode now allows those third-party JavaScript libraries to run without those restrictions. So it should be a nice update for a lot of developers working with LWC. And then finally, we are going to see a pilot for Einstein for developers, which is essentially AI-assisted coding directly inside of Salesforce or within the CLI. Moving on to Revenue Cloud, guided setup with Salesforce Go, which is going to allow us to have a faster onboarding experience when setting that up. You're able to associate multiple orders from a single quote, so that can simplify complex deals. There's deeper asset management tools to allow for more clear customer product tracking. And this is exciting. We're getting consumer price index based pricing adjustments. So it's much smarter and can dynamically adjust the pricing based on the current CPI numbers. So I think that's a really exciting update as well. Finally, moving on to our last lightning round section, we have commerce and some other cloud updates. In Commerce Cloud, we're getting flexible returns to allow for a better customer experience and the whole management of returns inside the system. Experience Cloud is getting upgrades to the LWR sites. So those are the more custom coded sites. It's less drag and drop. It's more code heavy. So that should be bringing a more modern and faster performance. In field service, we'll see dynamic scaling, which should help right size resources for demand when we're assigning resources out to jobs. For nonprofit cloud, we're getting a much faster experience for gift entry. So that should save a lot of time if you're working with nonprofit cloud, really focus on that impact. And then there's a brand new cloud called Partner Cloud, which is designed to track the complete partner lifecycle management. So overall, quite a bit of updates to hit here in this lightning round, and I'm excited to dive a little deeper into some of the other features.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's the high-level overview across the platform. So let's now dig deeper into the three biggest areas leaders and admins should be paying attention to: Agentforce, Salesforce Flow, and the core cloud updates in sales, service, marketing, and revenue. Let's start with Agentforce, because this is where Salesforce is flexing its AI muscle.
Absolutely. So we're going to see a few things here. Some items that were announced as long ago as last Dreamforce are finally making their way to the generally available side of things. So for example, there's now an AI-powered account research component, and this was demonstrated at Dreamforce last year, and it hasn't shown up until now. But this allows us to place this component on an account record or on an account planning record, and it will show customer insights to reps directly from those records. So it's able to actually go and retrieve information about an account, go and research that account, find trends, maybe find some competitor information, basically give you the information that you need to sell to that account or to manage that account. Maybe you're focusing more on retention and you want to know, the latest news going on or anything that could impact a project that you're currently working on. It should be able to go and reach out and automatically pull that data in. So that's exciting. I love that we're actually seeing that product get released after it was announced last year. On the Einstein side, in sales, we're seeing Einstein Summaries being brought to sales. So this was previously only available for Service Cloud. So you'd be able to get case summaries where if you're looking at a case, it could reference all the information you have stored there, your email threads, and give you some nice information at a glance so you don't have to go and search through all of that. Well, now we're bringing a similar functionality to sales, and that will provide some quick overviews very similar to Einstein for Service, where you're not going to have to dig through those records. It can reference information from accounts, contacts, opportunities, leads, and give you those nice summaries directly on the record. Now, this one it's both Agentforce and Flow, but it's an exciting update. So Flow decision elements are getting a really big upgrade because they can now leverage AI directly inside of that decision element to automate outcomes without hard-coded rules. So instead of, let's say you had a 10-branch decision element where you are having to evaluate criteria for every single one of those branches. Well, imagine instead of having to actually create all of those branches, you are just using natural language to describe how a given branch should be navigated. That's essentially what this is. You can type in natural language, and then that element will invoke a large language model to help make that decision and ultimately direct the process down the right path. So I'm excited to see this. I think this is a very practical use of AI that is not just specific to developers and business users, but this is directly applicable to admins because admins are working in Flow all the time. And so now to have the ability to just use AI from directly inside the Flow without necessarily having to build your own prompt template to go and perform this analysis and then send it back to the Flow. I love this. I think this is going to be one of the most exciting updates for several users, several admins out there. We're seeing some enhancements to the SDR agent. So previously, you were limited to, I think, 1,800 emails if you were on Gmail, and it was 8,000 or 9,000 if you were on Microsoft, and that's per day. Well, now it's going to be 10,000 emails per day. So we're seeing a bump, especially if you're on the Gmail side of things. You're seeing a big bump in the limits of the number of emails you're allowed to send with an SDR agent per day. And huge update here, multi-SDR agent support is coming to Salesforce. So up until today, you could only have a single SDR agent per org, which is pretty limiting because you could only use it for one use case. So if you needed to swap out a use case, you had to modify that agent and completely change how it behaves. Well, now you can have up to 5 SDR agents. So that means for different prospecting activities, maybe you have different segments and they're going to behave in different ways. You can now set up to 5 of those agents. You can send more emails. You can track scheduling link clicks now. So we're seeing a lot of technical investment on the SDR agent side of things that I think anyone that's used this tool or is currently using an SDR agent is going to find exciting. Okay, so now on knowledge articles, we now have the ability to generate dynamic question and answer sections from the information. So this is leveraging generative AI to actually go and scan through these articles and suggest Q&A sections based on the content. So that can lead to a much quicker capability of creating these articles, ultimately leading to better self-service support. And it's able to even show the most common questions and rank them by popularity. So you get some data back on that as well. On the Marketing Cloud side of things, we're seeing a new feature called Campaign Insights. So this is an agent action. So if you're working with Agentforce, this is an action that you can call within that agent to actually go and get campaign performance data and summarize key insights from those campaigns. So it just gives us another capability. It's an extension of the Agentforce platform into additional clouds, bringing us more data from more sources. So now we're seeing a lot of that in the marketing side. And then finally, we have conversation insights and transcript search capability. So this is the ability to auto-analyze sales calls. That's conversation insights. It can generate summaries of those calls. It can detect sentiment within those calls. And it also now has access to Data Cloud so that you can search through keywords in those conversations. So adding these conversations to Data Cloud gives it the ability to do things like semantic search and keyword search. And ultimately, it should lead to smarter coaching if we're able to go and analyze those transcripts and understand sentiment, maybe even understand, hey, as a salesperson, how am I presenting myself? Am I talking about the right things? So to be able to go and mine those conversations is a really nice upgrade.
So whether you're in sales, service, or marketing, Agentforce is basically your AI teammate. Zach, what can you tell us about Salesforce Flow in this new release?
As usual, we've got a lot of enhancements to Flow. So I'll try to go through these relatively quickly, but my encouragement to anyone listening is definitely to go and check out the release notes and check out the resources that we're going to provide at the bottom of the podcast here. Starting first, we have version comparisons and debugging tools. So this is an enhancement to when we're saving actual versions of flows, we can now directly compare those different versions. Previously, you really couldn't do this because you would have to go to different browser tabs and open up completely different versions, and you could get some weirdness going on with sessions and things like that. So now we're going to be able to actually compare versions directly. It's going to track changes from version to version, which has been a big missing piece with Flow development, is the ability to track changes. So that's very exciting. And then one thing that happened is the debug panel is now a side-by-side view. So previously that debug panel was on the right side of the screen. And when you opened it, it would essentially occlude your elements within that Flow canvas. Well, now it's on the other side. And so when you open it up, you can actually see your elements on the Flow canvas, which can help you make sense of what's going on if you're able to kind of see the process and the logic and compare that to the debug log. So that's a nice upgrade. Within the send email action, we have a brand new email recipient manager. That sounds really fancy, but all that really means is it's more like a multifunction lookup field. So you're able to add multiple variables to the recipient manager, as they're calling it. So it makes the send email configuration a little bit simpler, but it merges all the potential recipients that you would have for a given email into a single input. So that allows you to specify recipients from different variables without the need for first adding them all to a collection and then using that collection as your recipient list. You can essentially just add them piecemeal. So if I've got an email address that's in plain text, or I've got one that's assigned to a variable, or I've got a recipient that is a contact record or a lead record. The idea here is it's just one place for all your recipients, which should make that whole process a little bit more streamlined. In Flow Builder, we now have resizable panels. So the toolbox and the errors panel can now be resized. So that's a big help if you've ever been, debugging or you've been looking at errors. And again, it's blocking some portion of the screen. Well, now you have the ability to resize that so that you can keep all the information you need directly at hand. On the data table side of things, this is a little bit of a techie update, but the data table now supports Apex-defined variables. Previously, it did not. It was just record variables, S-object variables inside of Flow. So if you were working with Apex-defined data, you were maybe launching an Apex action to go and retrieve data, and that data is being returned in an Apex-defined variable, you didn't have the option to display that in a data table. Well, now we do. So we have the ability to now visualize these Apex-defined variables directly inside of a data table in a screen flow. One big update to the create records element is the ability to have immediate access to fields on that record. So the behavior previously has been, if I create a new record, all I really get as a result of that element is the ID of the record. So even if I am assigning values in that create records element, the only output I receive is the ID. So if you needed some of that information from the new record, you would have had to use an extra get element to go and find that record based on the ID and then pull down the field values that you would need to perform the rest of the logic in your flow. Well, now you're just going to get that. So you create the record and you'll immediately have access to those fields, which is very convenient. For one thing, it's less clicks for you to have to go in and retrieve that information, but it's also more performant because we're not introducing additional querying to our flow. We want to keep the number of pink elements, which is essentially data manipulation or querying. We want to keep those to a minimum so that the flow is at its maximum performance. And so the ability to do this without having to perform an additional query means we get more performant flows and we get a more convenient experience when we're building those flows. There is a new theme picker for screen flows, and this is specific to Experience Cloud. So if you're building a screen flow and you're going to deploy that flow on Experience Cloud, sometimes the way that it is displayed is not congruent with the styling and the theming that you might have in Experience Cloud. So this feature allows us to preview how the screen flow is going to work on a given experience by leveraging that theme. So it's just another convenience factor here so that you can know what it's going to look like before you actually deploy it. You have the ability to preview that as you're building it. There is a mandatory flow security update, and this is important. So everyone out there, if you only hear one thing about flow, this is the one to pay attention to because it could have some pretty negative impacts on your users. For a very long time, there is a checkbox on the user record called flow user. And historically, this is how we have given a user the ability to run flows. Well, that is completely going away. And this is not a new announcement. We've known that this was coming, but now it's being enforced. So now with that checkbox being removed, you have to control flow access with a flow user permission that you can assign to the profile or to a permission set. So the recommendation here is to audit your users, check if any of those users are selected for flow user, and make sure you have a permission set that has that new flow user permission assigned to it, and assign that out to users that need to be able to run flows. If you don't, then those users that have been able to run flows may suddenly not be able to do that. And if you've built out a lot of flows in your organization, maybe you're doing a lot of screen flows for custom data entry, that could essentially prevent them from doing their job until that permission is assigned. So definitely get ahead of that. Make sure you get that permission set created. Make sure you get those users assigned to that permission set so that you don't have any disruptions in your day-to-day. All right, I got 4 more for you, Sam. 4 more. So we're going down the list here. So the next one is there's a new time-based automations page. So this basically just gives you better visibility into all of the scheduled processes that you have in the system. So previously, this was in a few different places. You got scheduled jobs, you got the Apex queue, you've got your time-based workflow, which is a relic of the workflow rules days and using some time-based actions there. Well, now it's kind of all getting centralized into one time-based automations page. So it's better visibility. It's more modern. It's removing the word workflow and shifting to automation. So obviously workflow rules and process builder, those are no longer in vogue. They're no longer available. They're being completely retired at the end of the year. And so moving from the word workflow to automation is just keeping up with the pace of change. And so I think that should help with any confusion when we see the word workflow, because we always associate that with workflow rules. On the test side of things, we now have a centralized test execution area for both Flow and Apex testing. And so this was a little bit of a gap where Apex had this whole testing center where you're able to go and run tests, but Flow did this in a completely different way. Well, now both your Flow and Apex tests are going to be located in one central location, and you can now run Flow tests from the CLI, which is a really great upgrade. Flow analytics and monitoring. So we're getting some new capabilities to track and optimize your automation performance across the org. So there's a new standard report type that's coming to the system that allows you to monitor flow activity. So that can essentially give you the ability to stay on top of which flows are getting used the most, where are we running into errors. It just gives us greater visibility into what's going on. All right, and finally, at the last one here, Sam, we get runtime transaction decisions. Basically, what's happening here is Flow now has the ability to decide at the moment that it is run whether a new transaction is required or not. This can help reduce complex automations, and it gives more control over data commits. So the point in time when a flow is going to actually execute a data update, it's saving a record, it's updating a record, creating a record, deleting a record, whatever that may be, it now has the ability to decide if a new transaction is needed or if those updates can happen within the same transaction. So that should lead to smarter automation choices. It should lead to a more performant system overall. And so, yeah, that's essentially the rundown of all the Flow updates coming in Winter 26. I shouldn't say all, there's more. Check the release notes, but those are some of the big highlights.
Okay, take a deep breath, Zack. Thank you very much for that deep dive. We're going to go on to the next one now. We're going to look at the cloud updates for the next one. Okay, so Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Revenue Cloud. Zack, walk us through what leaders should actually care about here, please.
Absolutely. So, Sam, we got a bunch of updates here. I'm going to run through each of them pretty quickly. On the Sales Cloud side of things, we now have Slack channels that can be auto-created from records. This will create a Slack channel when writing a message in the chat component on a record page. So if you've got Slack integrated with your system, you can put this component on the page so that you can easily see conversations going on with, let's say, an account or an opportunity. It's really common to create a Slack channel for a given opportunity if you've got a sales team and you're working that deal together. Well, now this will automatically create that channel when you start writing a message in that component. And so that really streamlines things. You don't have to create that channel yourself. You don't have to write an automation to create that channel. It's really just a built-in capability. On the forecasting side of things, we now have both product splits and custom fiscal years. So a couple things that have been missing in forecasting. Custom fiscal years has been on the roadmap for a long time. And so now the ability to define that, I think, is going to be big for a lot of organizations. I mean, Salesforce themselves do not operate on a standard fiscal year. Their fiscal year starts in February, I believe. So it's a little bit delayed. They're kind of 1 month off. So the ability to do that for a lot of organizations that don't use a standard fiscal year, this will be a great upgrade to their forecasting. You can now set default date ranges as well, and you can create more granular forecasts with opportunity product splits, which has been a feature that's been missing for a long time. So I think for a lot of organizations that maybe have held off on using the forecasting tool inside of Salesforce, hopefully these updates will provide a more compelling reason to dive in. On the sales performance management side of things, you now have the ability to motivate teams more effectively. There's AI-powered segment assistance, which can help in segment management. Agentforce can assist with territory planning, Maps now includes mileage timesheets. So we're seeing a lot of sort of little updates to make these very niche areas of the platform a little bit more efficient. So if you're using maps, if you're using territory management, if you're creating segments, this now brings some extra capabilities to hopefully make your life a little bit easier, give you a little bit more power. On the Service Cloud side of things, there's a number of updates, and this is one where I will say check out the resources in the description to dive deeper into these. So at a high level, cases now support rich text descriptions, which has been something we've been asking for a long time. Used to just be one wall of text with no styling or anything, but now we can use rich text within those descriptions. Surveys are getting more flexible capabilities with the ability to capture partial responses. So if you've ever used Salesforce surveys, the experience is you only get the data when the user actually submits the survey. Well, now you have the ability to collect those partial responses as the survey is being completed, which is a great upgrade and allows us to capture more information in the event of a form abandonment or somebody leaving that survey behind. And we also get limits on multiple choice selections. So if you had a need with a survey to only allow a few options to be selected, we now have the ability to set some limits there. Within messaging conversations, video support is now coming. And now that could mean a lot of things, but what this means specifically is that if a customer sends you a video file, you as the service agent, as the customer support representative, you can now play that video file directly in that conversation. Previously, you could not do that. You could get the file, but you would have to go and actually click download and then open that on your computer in order to view the video. Now that native support is coming directly to the conversation component. On the call side of things, we now have multi-party call support. So if we needed to bridge multiple parties into a single call, that capability is now available. There's smarter SLA tracking with the ability to prioritize milestones. You can pause milestones, and it also brings semantic search to the platform where you've got the ability to search through your SLAs and information on your cases. And so we're seeing kind of a mix of just general platform enhancements and then a few of these enhancements that are powered by AI. On the Marketing Cloud side of things, you may have heard about Marketing Cloud Next. This is essentially the next generation of Marketing Cloud that is built on platform. So this is sort of the maximalist version of Marketing Cloud Growth and Marketing Cloud Advanced that has all of the AI features that Salesforce is releasing. So it's going to create a unified essentially a unified tool for all the AI capabilities in Marketing Cloud. It gives you a single launchpad type of interface for all of the marketing things that you would need inside of that platform. The content builder now has the ability to have an AI agent draft and revise content, and not just draft and revise content, but reference your brand voice in how it actually creates that content. Now, this is a big upgrade because if we're looking at the competitive landscape, this is something HubSpot's had for a while, where HubSpot allows you to upload your brand voice and reference different pieces of writing so that it can actually draft information using that same style. So to see this come to Salesforce on the marketing side of things, I think is a big update, and it's a good competitive play to remain essentially up to par with some of the other features that other marketing tools are putting out into the market. In addition to the AI drafting capability, content blocks in emails and landing pages can now be reused. And so this is a big deal, because if I created a really beautiful portion of a landing page and it was so good and I really just wish that I could use that elsewhere, well, previously you would have just had to recreate it. You'd have to go and look at it and say, all right, I got to copy and paste it. I got to make sure I can style it. Now you can design these different blocks of content that you can essentially recycle and just pull up and insert into landing pages and emails elsewhere. So that's a big time saver. And I think a lot of people that are using these new Marketing Cloud on platform tools will be really excited about that. And that also brings these newer tools up to parity with things like Marketing Cloud and Marketing Cloud Account Engagement that have similar capabilities. Now you're not really having to sacrifice that if you decide to move on to the Marketing Cloud on platform tools. And then finally, the last piece on Marketing Cloud is you can now test Marketing Cloud Next, Marketing Cloud on platform in a sandbox. So previously, that capability was not there. So you were building in production, you were having to test in production. Well, now you have the ability to do that in a sandbox, which should lead to safer campaign launches so that you don't have to risk doing that in your production org. All right, and finally, let's do some quick updates on Revenue Cloud. Some of these we mentioned sort of in the lightning round, but we're getting that guided onboarding experience with Salesforce Go. So you've probably seen this with a lot of other products on the platform. If you're working in Service Cloud or Sales Cloud, even Agentforce, there's this special page in setup called Salesforce Go. And it has all these different cards with all these different clouds, and it gives you guided onboarding depending on which cloud you select. So now that's coming to Revenue Cloud, which will be really nice because the experience for that initial setup, it really walks you through a ton of the things you need to do. So instead of having to keep the reference documents up on one window and then working in the other window, you now have a little bit more of a guided onboarding experience that can make that process easier. So we're getting catalog performance boost. You have the ability to set the category sort order. We can now manage the cache to make it more performant. We can also deep clone quotes and sales transactions. So deep cloning is great. That means not only am I taking the quote record with all the information on the quote, but I can clone all the related records. So that's important because quotes often have a bunch of related data. So I have quote lines, I have pieces that are related to each of those. So the ability to deep clone just means it's much easier to actually create a workable clone of a record, where instead of having to create just the record and then go manually recreate the lines or create your own automation to do that for you, now we have a built-in deep clone capability. All right. And also in Revenue Cloud, we have support for multiple orders per quote. So previously, I believe this was a single order per quote, which is pretty limiting because you may have separate orders associated with a given quote. So now we have the ability to associate multiple orders there. And then finally, we did mention this before, but just want to mention it again. The CPI-based pricing capability, I think, is going to be really nice for organizations that rely on that when they're pricing their products. So it should really streamline the quoting and pricing process on top of Revenue Cloud.
Zack, you've just covered a mountain of features. So if I'm a business leader out there and I'm trying to make sense of it all, what's the one message that you'd leave me with?
I don't know if I can just leave you with one message, Sam, but here's what I'll say. Find the features that are most relevant to your business and hone in on what is going to make the most impact. Obviously, there's a ton of new features with every single Salesforce release. This one is no exception. There's a lot to sort through. It can be hard to focus on what matters most. So understand what you use today. Review the updates that are most impactful for your business, because this will be different from business to business, cloud to cloud, depending on what you do and which products you use. And search through those resources, listen through what we talked about today, just find a few things that really hit home and then focus in on those to bring the most value to your business. And then finally, I'll leave you with this. Don't sleep on AI. Because almost every edition of Salesforce, if you are on enterprise or above, if you're on professional, you're out of luck for now. But right now, if you're on enterprise or above, you get access to Salesforce Foundations for free. And Agentforce is included with up to 100,000 credits for you to try it out of the box. So if you've been hesitating and you haven't wanted to get started, just know that you can do that for free today at very little risk, because you get some credits allocated to you immediately. And that can allow you to start playing around with Agentforce, with AI, and determine if that's going to have an ROI and an impact for your business.
Zack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Sam. Thanks for having me. And if you want to learn more about AI and how it might be beneficial to your business, head to fastslowmotion.com/AI and get in touch. We would love to discuss how AI can work for you.
The Winter 26 release is all about working smarter with AI, automating more with Flow, and moving faster across every Salesforce cloud. If you're looking for a simpler way to digest all the changes, we've done the work to break down the release information and make it easy. Check out our catalog of related content in the description. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Fast Slow Motion podcast. A big thank you to Zack Terry for unpacking the Winter 26 release for us. And if you want help putting these updates to work in your business, you can connect with us at fastslowmotion.com. As always, you can catch past episodes at fastslowmotion.com/podcast, or you can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you've got a question or a topic that you'd like us to cover, you can drop us a note at fastslowmotion.com/podcast.